Hello and welcome back to Parley. Lordrusty paid for this one. If you're not them, I hope you'll enjoy listening. Let's see what they have to say. Lordrusty says, February, Parley. I'm back at it with the homebrew. I've been working on a new Dungeons & Dragons class based on the idea of a martial character with low HP who has the option to be revived if they are killed. No playtest done yet. This is very much a first draft. I'm calling this class the Undying, and I've written the first 10 levels of it. Current concerns are as follows. Is this class broken if used as a multiclass with something like Barbarian? And the non-spellcasting subclasses might be a little lackluster. What are your thoughts and feedback? As usual, feel free to be pretty honest with your feedback. I'm not precious about criticism. You'll love to see it, Lordrusty. Not being precious about criticism is only darn way to criticize there is, as far as I'm concerned. So that sounds great. Cool. The Undying. Right, so this is going to be a class for Dungeons & Dragons, or, you could use it for whatever role-playing system. Really, they should be pretty transferable. Let's talk about what a class could be thought of as being. In Dungeons & Dragons, anyway, you get a race or a species that you are, a class, and then a background or an origin that is yours. And broadly, you could think of them as being on a spectrum from how much they determine your gameplay to how much they are a statement about who your character is or was before the adventure. Background, at least the way Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition does them, is mostly about who your character was. There's not too many mechanical impacts. Race or species is a little bit of a mix of the two. It impacts your gameplay, certainly, but is also a fairly, chunk of your character, at least it could be. And your class, while not entirely mechanical, certainly determines, most of the game actions your character can take. That being said, I think it's important to focus on how classes can also be a big role-playing component. For example, a sorcerer, in Dungeons & Dragons anyway, is someone who has inherited their magic or kind of innately has their magic, or something happened to them and now they just have those magical abilities. They didn't learn them, they didn't study them, they didn't make a deal for them, they don't get them by praying to a deity. They didn't necessarily do anything as per se, or they did something that they weren't exactly clear would give them those abilities, or maybe they did, I suppose. You could get sorcerer abilities on purpose. But in any case, they're now innate and largely unconditional insofar as they don't need to ask anyone or appease anything to keep using them. Broadly, anyway. You could play a sorcerer differently, of course. I'm just saying that's kind of the role-playing pitch for this type of magic. A warlock, likewise, is someone who got their magic by making a deal. They get it from a warlock patron who is a mid-level magical entity. That is a big role-playing prompt. It doesn't have to be. You could play Dungeons & Dragons or whatever and not have your class be a role-playing prompt. But it can be. This leads me to an immediate criticism that I just want to do something about over the course of talking about this class, which is that I think that the concept of the Undying, I'm not totally sold that is archetypical or general enough to make sense as a class. It feels like a subclass, which it is. You might know, some people who've played Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition a lot are screaming at the screen that there already is a warlock subclass that is called the Undying, I believe, and does some of these things, more or less. It is very, very similar to this. So I'm going to assume that you either didn't know about that or you intend to make it its own class. Possibly that is a glorious pursuit, by the way. I'm not saying that means it's bad. I'm just saying I think it's worth thinking about whether the scope of the concept of a being that is the Undying, an undying person, we'll get to that in a minute, is that the size that classes are in the system you're playing. Let me give you an example. The idea of someone who comes back from the dead repeatedly or has a wishy-washy relationship with death, that's something that normally in the scope of all fiction, it kind of seems like, is that a common thing? But you could have a world where it was. Imagine a world where there's like a lot of zombies, to oversimplify, right? Lots of people are on the edge of death, or like in the world of Curse of Strahd with lots of vampires and stuff. That feels like a location where this feels more like an archetype. So it kind of fits the theme of the environment. So those are my thoughts on that. I just wanted to say that before we start. And as we read these features, we can think about what kind of being this might be, what type of what it means to be an undying. What does it mean to be a wizard? You studied your magic. What does it mean to be a bard? You do magic with art. You art at people. What could undying lives be like? I don't know how to word that, but you get what I mean, right? Okay. Enough about that. Let's read the class. Class features. For each of these, if you're not familiar with Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, I'll summarize, their implications as best I see them. So here's the basic class features. Hit dice is 1d6. That's the lowest. That's the lowest hit die, usually reserved for super squishy spellcasters. Remember, Rusty said that this is a martial class, so they're going to be in the thick of combat, perhaps. And they have low health because they're going to be given a powerful ability to not die when they die, to be revived. So they have low health as a consequence. They will need to be revived. They're going to need to get some advantages that offset that. Cool. They get more hit points based on constitution. That stuff is normal. Medium armor and shields, pretty good. They will have moderate to high armor class, and it looks like they have some options out of the gate that let them more or less have that high armor right away. Good, very strong. Medium armor and shields, good stuff, powerful. Weapons, simple weapons, not martial weapons. Okay, interesting. No tools, saving throws. This is important. What types of effects are they better at resisting? Constitution and wisdom, very powerful set of saving throws. Wisdom saves are very common. A lot of spells are a wisdom save. A lot of the generic magical damaging effect that isn't like a fireball or something, that would be dexterity. And then constitution, a lot of those can be quite debilitating, and a good amount of area of effect damage things are constitution saves. Constitution saving throws also help you maintain concentration on spells, and we can see over here that this class does get some spell casting. It looks to me like they're a half or quarter spellcaster compared to a full spellcaster that uses the warlock type spell castings. We'll get into that in a minute. There isn't exactly a warlock kind of half spellcaster. They get more and more powerful spells at about half the speed of a full leveled warlock, because they also do martial stuff. That makes sense. There are half spellcasters for normal types of spellcasting in Dungeons and Dragons. The Artificer, the Paladin, the Ranger. And if you've seen Matt Mercer's Blood Hunter, they have a subclass that is a half warlock spellcaster, which I think is a really cool idea. So cool stuff. We'll talk about that more once we get to that feature. But yeah, good overall. I'm just going to browse the skills you can pick. It's mostly what you would expect. We're not going to get too much into the equipment. It seems reasonable. A lot of players might argue or ask you as a DM to let them buy the equipment anyway. You get the point. Okay, revival. This is the big thing. At first level, you gain the ability to be revived from death once per long rest. Creature must touch you and speak your true name. Allowing a creature to know your true name puts you at disadvantage against any saving throws that you have against that creature. The revival process takes 1 minute if your body's whole, or 10 minutes if any body parts have been separated from each other but are within 5 feet of you. If a body part is further than 5 feet from you, it can't be reattached as part of this feature. You'll have to wait until the next time you use this feature to reattach them. If a body part has been destroyed, burned, dissolved, etc., it can't be regrown using this feature. Upon using it, you return to life with half your max HP. You gain an additional use of this feature once per long rest at 5th, 10th, 15th, and 20th level. Okay, a lot to break down. From a writing perspective, first of all, I think that the true name thing should be separate. That feels like an important part of this class. I think the idea that this kind of fleshes out like the lore of an Undying too. You're a being with a power, a true name, a word of power that can be spoken to do things to you. Interesting. Like that kind of broadens the scope of what you could understand this class to be. That's cool. I think it's worth writing that separate, even though it's short. What does this feature do? Now, in Dungeons & Dragons, if you go down, if you lose all your HP, you go into a sort of downed state type thing. Lots of games have something like this where it might be a shooter or it might be a role-playing game of some description where you lose all your health, but you go down and your allies can try to revive you as long as the enemy doesn't go for the double tap, which you should always do. In a competitive game, you got to be careful of those people getting revived. People often put a lot of pressure on them. In a role-playing game setting, the NPC enemies may or may not think it makes sense to like make sure someone is dead after they're unconscious and no longer attacking them, right? If you get attacked by me and you attack me and I'm unconscious and you're defending yourself, do you like need to make sure I'm dead? You know what I mean? Like for most people, probably no. So when you go down or you lose all your health in Dungeons and Dragons, you do need to succeed at death saving throws. You need to roll to not die, to stabilize as being unconscious. But you're probably not going to encounter enemies too often that finish you off in general. You could make a campaign where that was otherwise, but yeah. So to clarify, what this feature does is let you be revived very easily if you die. Not just if you lose all your HP, but if you lose all your HP and someone either finishes you off or you fail death saving throws. You can normally be revived in that situation, but the revival spells are expensive and they don't start until 5th level. You get this at 1st level and it doesn't cost any money. However, it does still take a minute. The thing to compare this to is something like Revivify. It's a 5th level, a spell characters would get at 5th level. It's a 3rd level spell, but at when the party is level 5, if they have someone that could learn that spell, they could pay a lot of money, 300 gold, to revive someone in combat immediately. If you die in the middle of a fight, this feature probably won't save your party if they need you, because it takes a minute. The combat will likely be over by the time this activates. So I would view this feature really as something that revolves around a play style. You need to talk to your party and say, I'm going to go in and like almost assuredly die, and you should just accept that and revive me after the fight by speaking my true name. Another thing I noticed about this is that it doesn't require you to have been dead only a short time. Revivify must be used quite immediately. Other revival spells care about how long you were dead, although the higher level and the more expensive they are to cast, the less they care about how long you were dead. The way you worded this feature, it doesn't matter how long you were dead. I feel like I think it'd be a nice little flavor thing if there was some very high limit, like you have to have died within the last 200 years or something. That's what true resurrection is, I think. You can't revive anyone from literally any time, but as long as your body's still there, well, you would have decayed if it was 200 years. I don't know, maybe that doesn't matter. Anyway, a lot of words, a lot of considerations, half of the parlay practically, talking about, yeah, like what this does, basically. I would say more or less, this allows you to use yourself as an expendable fodder unit in the party. And I think that players that are worried about the power level of this class are now probably concerned that you do enough good stuff during the time that you bum rush the enemies and probably die and then safely get revived. You need to do enough good things during that time to make it worth it. Now at level 6, we'll get to this a little bit later, you gain the ability once per long rest to be revived in just an action instead of 1 minute. That is very powerful. That's a very big change in tactics. It's interesting that that's also around the level that you get Revivify. Lordrusty probably knew that. That's interesting. I think it'd be nice if that was at 5th level. It would be elegant as a way to address that concern. Yeah, overall, again, I'm totally sold on the fantasy so far. Of your tactics involve dying, and it's kind of nailed home with this second feature, Sleep Like the Dead. At 2nd level, you gain the benefits of a short or long rest if you're dead for 1 or 8 hours, respectively. The funniest feature, by the way. Normally, you can take a short rest, regain some hit points, get your spell slots back. We'll get to that in a minute as a warlock. If you rest for 1 hour, and you get the benefits of a long rest if you rest for 6 to 8 hours. Let's not get into it, but basically, this feature lets you get those benefits if you rest or are dead for that amount of time. You don't have to like rest as per se. I want to draw a comparison to a subclass that I really enjoy, the Genie Warlock. Genie Warlocks gain a vessel that allows them to go inside and perhaps rest in there. They can be inside for quite a long time, even right off the bat. So, for example, I might have a ring, a magic ring, or a lamp, or my Genie Warlock that I'm currently playing. It's a compact mirror like you'd use for makeup, but it's shattered. And you can go into it, a couple of times a day, once per day at first. But you start out with the ability to be in there a long time. So my character could get ambushed by enemies, use their spells, oh no, I'm going to lose, take my genie vessel, chuck it in a lake, and at the same moment go inside of it. And the genie vessel will sit underwater for a while I relax inside of my lamp, base, and take a short rest, which will get me my spell slots back as a warlock. Now, my entire party will be dead or gone when I get back. So does it matter? Features like this, my big concern is, but how do you use this? When do you benefit from this? I don't know. It feels like a feature where you kind of need, the player has to split the party for it to do anything. That's my concern. I'm sold on the flavor. I think it's really funny, but I'm not sure I like that as a 2nd level feature. A big complaint I have as well is that, yeah, you have the revival thing, but at 1st level, that's it. I mean, you're a normie with no spells. Do you already have? Oh no, it's just for Pact Maid that you get warlock spells. You have no features. You're just like 1d6 and you can be revived, and that's it. But really only after combat is over. I really think the player needs some initial features, like they need something to use in combat. I don't know what exactly, but I don't think this is enough stuff. Like until 3rd level, you're essentially a normal commoner that can just be brought back from the dead after accomplishing probably little of note in combat. And now, mind you, you can actually get pretty far with the basic mechanics of Dungeons and Dragons combat. You're not just a normal commoner. If you, build for dexterity or strength or whatever, your melee output would be all right. Some spellcasters at lower levels stick to mundane weapons, like a light crossbow, for example, is pretty common, or a hand crossbow. Because they do about as much damage output, or they're about as effective as their currently not very powered up, cantrips or basic magical spells. So it's not like you won't do anything good, but I don't feel like revival is enough benefit to make, like if you compare to a fighter, they have almost twice as much health. They can act twice, like take a double action once per short rest. They get a fighting style. That's a great thing we could add. That stuff isn't, you won't need to be revived if you have all that stuff. We need a benefit that makes it more worthwhile. I think because of the 1 minute time on revival, you don't need to worry too much about, like, that feature currently provides almost no power to the player at this level. Unless they have other benefits, I wouldn't worry too much about it being unbalanced. I don't think the player really gains much from that if they don't have something to recklessly use. I think that what would sell this for me would be to have effects or abilities or features that are very self-destructive. Like, they're powerful, but you need to do things that will probably get you killed to use them. For example, being in melee. So I'm looking ahead a little bit, and you can see that one of the subclasses is called the volatile. That sounds like what I'm referring to. Let's read them and possibly consider giving the player their subclass earlier. That could solve this very handily. If they could do these things earlier, that could help. For example, having Warlock spellcasting. Not very much Warlock spellcasting, but some Warlock spellcasting. But you can be revived with the revival trait. That's not bad. I mean, it's not, that's good. You're like more or less a Warlock, but you can be brought back from the dead. Like, that ain't bad. I don't think that's bad. So we could consider that so far that seems like the most elegant thing to do. Just make you get your subclass at first or second level. And for players that begin at first or second level, I know a lot of people start at third level. That seems like it would handily solve that issue. Okay, so let's read what they are first. Oh God. Okay, the volatile. I read a bit fast and I know what's coming. At third level, when you fail your last saving throw, I assume you mean death saving throw. When you lose all your HP and you're doing death saves to stabilize or die, find out your fate. When you fail your last, I assume you meant death saving throw, you cast Fireball targeted at yourself. Your body is unaffected by the spell. Use your Constitution bonus to determine the spell DC. Increase the level of the Fireball by an additional level at 7th, 11th, 15th, and 19th level of Undying. At 9th level, when reduced to 0 hit points on your turn, when you make a death save, you could choose to fail all your death saves and use your volatile feature immediately. Doing so gives disadvantage or advantage on the save to any creatures you choose within range of the spell. I assume you can choose who gets disadvantage and who gets advantage. Okay, yeah, so this is very funny. You see what I mean? So like that gives you a big payoff for dying. Now, obviously, if you make it a first level feature, dying immediately and then you cast Fireball will one-shot most first level encounters. So, you can't literally just copy paste that to be a first level skill. But this is totally the beginning of what I was talking about. You see what I mean? That's a very funny but meaningful tactic that you could use to make it rewarding to run in, do kind of meh effectiveness, and then die. I really like that you can choose to just straight up die. That's interesting. I almost want the 9th level feature to be you can choose to just full health, you die and explode, and then someone has to revive you. That seems fine. You probably need to make it be like once per long rest or something. The way you've worded it, it's elegant. You can let the player immediately fail all their death saves as often as you want because they have to actually get dead first. That's elegant design. I think it'd be interesting if the player could just like straight up unalive themselves on the spot and then explode. That seems fun. Maybe we can make a feature that's a compromise of those. Like at first level, maybe you imagine if you got this at first level, you could make a feature where you part of your body explodes and you do like a little minor damage explosion. Imagine like the shatter spell. So you do, I don't remember exactly what shatter's numbers are, but you do like 2d6 fire damage, force damage, I don't know, in a little area around you by exploding part of your body, and you also take the damage. Now at level 1 or at low levels, that will often kill you. It doesn't make you able to straight up decide you're going to die on the spot, most of the time, but at low levels you will probably die from taking that much damage, which lets you kind of embrace you can get the fireball thing a little bit on command, and you get a little more damage. Again, until 5th level or 6th level, when you can revive within an action, you're basically out of the fight. All you did was, do an AoE explosion. If there are like ranged enemies or enemies that, I don't know, don't cluster into a group, you can't really do anything to them using that tactic. So I don't think it's that bad to let the player do that. Anyway, very, very cool idea. We got to keep going because there's still a good amount to cover, but really cool idea. I'm thinking about whether we got to figure out the first level thing, but we'll come back to that later. Let's read the rest. Second one is called the Savant. At 3rd level, you get 2 additional skill proficiencies and expertise double proficiency in one skill you're already proficient in. So your bonuses for more things will be higher, and one of them can be super high. Whenever you die, you can change 2 of your skill proficiencies or your expertise to a different skill you're already proficient in. At 9th level, you gain expertise in an additional skill and can cast the spell Scry without using any components or spell slots while you are dead. Interesting. Another benefit for getting killed. This seems like you need to convince your party to kill you pretty often. The utility of this one is like you want a barbarian friend who will cut you in half on the regular so you can do this stuff. That sounds fun. Again, that would you need the right campaign, but I'm not sold on the flavor of this one. Just a quick note. I feel like this should be clear by now, but I'm trying to attack this from any potential player's mindset. Plenty of people just won't be that concerned about exactly the flavor or exactly the balance, but those are all things that, like, why not get them all right? It's better design if it serves an unknown player, not one specific player. But Lordrusty specifically may be a person, you might be someone who you don't really care, you just want it to work for your group. I have no way to critique any other way, so just to clarify, it's not bad to design something that would really only work for your group of players. But I can't really do that in this situation, so I'm not. But it's fine if you wanted to do that. I'm just not going to. Okay. I'm not sold on the lore of this one. I also don't think it's that good. Again, there really isn't any meaningful benefit to being this subclass, this class yet, especially if you don't pick the volatile or the pact made, which gives you some real payoff for being dead. The savant, we'll get back to the flavor in a sec, gives you this thing where you're kind of one of the jack of all trades kind of skill type characters. Bards and rogues are often good at this. Rangers sometimes. It lets you kind of do that thing in a way that those characters can't. You can die and change stuff. You have a somewhat awkward but quite versatile way to change things up very frequently. Remember, by the way, that it says whenever you die you can change them, but remember the undying can't be revived infinite times a day, so you can't. Don't worry, DMs, they can't change this as much as they want. They can change it once per day, kind of. There's a similar warlock subclass where you can do like a seance-esque thing and gain different skills. There's a rogue subclass that does something similar. And I'm not saying that's bad. I think that's a cool idea. That's the idea that you can sort of commune with the dead is what it is with those. And they whisper skill proficiencies to you. I don't understand why, like, what's happening when you do this. I think this one is, for me, not working as a role-playing prompt. The idea of a corpse that explodes, I totally get it. The idea of, we'll get to the pact made in a sec, the ability to not die or come back from the dead feels like a deal with the devil kind of thing. So warlock magic, sure. Again, there literally is a warlock subclass that is more or less a similar ability. So I'm sold on the fantasy, the role-playing element of that. But this one I don't really get. I guess it's like you come back having gotten some inspiration. This is like when you go to the bathroom and you get really good ideas, which I mean, most corpses poop when they die, so uh, I don't know. But I don't know. It might just be the name. I want I want a combat benefit for this one. I don't want to leave it at this. How about I don't love this, but it's a very simple idea. You simply also gain a weapon proficiency from this feature, and you can change it when you die. That sounds cool. Again, I'm not sure what's happening here exactly. From a role playing or a lore perspective, like in for this character, what is actually occurring when these things switch? Why? Other than it being that they perform a little seance time while they're dead. That could be it, but yeah, I like the idea of maybe you get a weapon proficiency as well. Maybe when you use those things, you maybe more expertise would help me. You gain not as many skill proficiencies, but you gain one additional skill proficiency and you have expertise in it. And this would be a somewhat unique thing to this class, this subclass. You get a weapon proficiency and you have expertise in it. Normally, they don't do that in 5th edition, but you could. You gain a weapon proficiency and you get double proficiency with that weapon, basically, expertise. I'm not aware of any other feature that gives you the equivalent of expertise with a weapon. That is very powerful. That would make you very accurate with that weapon. You could flavor this as something like you gain an intensity from constantly being on the edge of death, like a sort of not adrenaline, but you've seen the other side kind of thing, like an attunement with the beyond. I could see it being something like that. Maybe that's what you had in mind. Don't have much more to say about this one. The scrying spell, I'm interested in the spellcasting sub-theme here, but we're going to get to that in a minute. The Pact Made, not a whole lot to say. You get one Warlock spell slot. When you take a short rest, you get your spell slot back. 9th level, whenever you use your 1st level revival feature, you get your spell slot back. And remember, at 9th level, you would be able to do that with an action. Being able to die, and then you get your spell slot back as an action when ally has to revive you, is cool. You're in the middle of combat, you use your one spell, you die, and then you get revived, and then you get it back. That's cool. I like that. And you could do that a few times at 9th level. By 9th level, you can revive twice. And 10th level, you get the 3rd time. Quick notes on Warlock spellcasting. Being a half caster as a Warlock spellcasting is a little weird. Warlocks have less spell slots, but they're of a kind of higher level, always at the highest level. They don't get different leveled spell slots. And compared to other spellcasters, the result is that if you take 2 short rests a day, Warlocks get a bit more of their highest level spellcasting, but not all at once, and they don't get lower level spellcasting. So there's that trade-off. If they pace themselves, they do get more highest power level spells, but other spellcasters are casting more spells overall, just not more spells of the current highest power level. Because Warlocks inherently get less overall spells, the difference when you become a half spellcaster as a Warlock is, I think, bigger. For example, if you know, if you're at 10th level, 5 spells. Remember, the Warlock can cast 1 of them in a fight. Going from even 2 spells, which is what normal Warlocks start with per short rest, to 1 is a big deal. You can't really use like a buff and then a leveled spell. You can't debuff the enemy and then use a leveled spell. However, the Warlock gets Eldritch Blast, very powerful attack cantrip, although a lot of its power is from Eldritch Invocations, which you can't straightforwardly get with this subclass. You could take a feat that gives you them, which you should probably do if you take the Pact Mate. Getting 2 Warlock cantrips is almost better than getting 1 Warlock leveled spell. You can take Eldritch Blast and then a utility cantrip, and you're cooking with gas. That's good. It is kind of just a feat, though. I don't know. I don't think this is powerful enough. Anyway, overall, I think that everything so far is much too underpowered It's not very effective. It doesn't do enough. You get the normal ASI. Fearless attacker, when you're below half hit points, you get an extra attack. Doesn't stack with other extra attacks. You get extra attack. If you're above half hit points and land an attack on an enemy, roll an additional damage die of your choice, d4 to d12, scaling with level, and deal the result plus your constitution modifier as additional damage to both yourself and your opponent. Oh, you get to choose. Cool, this lets you hurt yourself. Great, make this at level 1. Make this be at level 1. Okay, so let's break down what this does. When you're above half health and you hit with an attack, you roll an additional damage die. You can pick any die, just not a d20. So you could pick a d4, you could pick a d12, you could pick a d8, whatever. This does additional damage, plus your constitution modifier, to the enemy and you. This lets you kind of reduce your health on command, like I was saying for the volatile. Cool. Now, if you give the player this too early, then they can, like, on demand just straight up kill themselves. But unless they're the volatile, it doesn't really matter. And I don't think that's necessarily bad. So I think you should give the player this at level 1. Now, you probably need to limit the damage die a little, because otherwise they can one-shot stuff, but then they die, but then they can just be revived. It might be surprisingly fine to let the player do d4 to d12 at level 1. Let's say they hit with a greatsword. They do 2d6 plus their modifier. Let's say it's +3. And then they use this and they pick the d12 and they roll an 8. They did, on average, what is that? Like 15 to 20 damage, a lot. They, cut the orc they were fighting straight in half, and then they die. I kind of think that's fine. I feel like that's good, actually. Like, that's fine. There are other orcs. The party tries to fight the orcs on their own. I'm not even sure that feature was actually that good in that situation. And then, or they might not die. The player might survive. And then they need to be revived using their revival feature. And at higher levels, it becomes less of a ridiculous damage increase. I like that. I think you do it like that. I think that's cool. And I like the idea that the feature has synergy with itself. When you're below half hit points, you just get an extra attack. So when you're at low health, you get a kind of berserker flavor. Now, you mentioned overlap with barbarians. Some concerns about multiclassing, which we'll get to right at the end here. But also there is some cursory overlap with the idea of a barbarian. Now, to my memory, there aren't actually almost any barbarian features that involve this berserker thing where you're at lower health and you get stronger. I think you're good on that front. In fact, I'm really sold on that being part of the flavor of this, that you're a sort of, it feels like a blood hunter, barbarian, warlock word cloud. You have a somewhat magical way in which you are stronger when you're close to death. That's really cool. More features like that would be fun. Things that benefit you for being at low health. You could do that with the Pact Maid, perhaps. You get another spell slot when you take enough damage or get at low enough health or something. You have a second warlock spell slot, but you can only use it when you're like below half health or something like that. Things like that probably don't do that as is, but you could figure something out. I think this should be a first level feature. I was gonna do, you get a fighting style, and that might be a good idea. Give the player at second level, give the player all the offensive fighting styles. None of the ones that add like +1 armor class, nothing like that. No defense fighting style. Give them all the offensive ones that are, and only melee ones. They'll probably will use a ranged weapon here and there, but encourage them to melee. And then give them fearless attacker. And I think, do we want it to be only when you're kind of close to enemies? No, you can use it at range. Also, if you just die, like if you snipe someone with a longbow and then you use fearless attacker and then you blow yourself up to your d12 damage, yeah, that's fine. Like, that's okay. One last quick note. Being able to scale the damage you do to enemies based on constitution modifiers is very powerful. You can scale the amount of health you have with the amount of damage you're doing to enemies. Very strong. Normally you have to pick one or the other. This is one of, there are a few other ways in 5th edition, but this is one of the only features that lets you do both at once. That's very strong when combined with things like certain fighter subclasses. The Rune Knight comes to mind, and also the Dumpier, the vampire-esque kind of, but not quite a vampire race. Both have pretty powerful features that scale with your constitution. That will be a very strong combination if you don't do anything about it. Not saying that's necessarily a problem, but it's, yeah. Making Fearless Attacker a level 1 feature, it exacerbates the multiclassing problem, so we need to address that now. The multiclassing issue. So the idea is that this, you could just take one level in Undying, and you're giving the player the ability to take just one level away from their primary class and basically make resurrection spells free. This kind of encourages them to delay their own build for something that will feel sort of mandatory. They'll feel like they're just wasting the party's time if they don't stop getting what they want for their character and just get the Undying really quick. Two things. First of all, a role-playing enough group probably won't do this because it just doesn't make sense for the character. Why do you suddenly have the ability to not die? You know, it's not like you can learn it. When I DM, I generally tell my players that if they know they want a multi-class, they need to tell me ahead of time, or they can't multi-class into a class that makes no sense in the situation their character ends up in. For example, 1, my player might say, hey, I'm planning to be a warlock sorcerer. Is that okay? And I'd say, absolutely. Is there any particular order you want to do those in? I just ask because I want to try to fit it into the story. If I know you're planning to go sorcerer level 1, 2, and then warlock at level 3 or whatever, maybe I would plan for you to meet your patron when the party is around level 3, because that would just be fun. You can do it either way. I just think it would be cool. So let's coordinate. If the player doesn't decide that ahead of time, and I have another player who says, hey, I'm going to be a druid, and I'm like, cool, got it. You're a druid. And then at level 5, they say, I want to be, I'm taking a level in sorcerer. I would say, okay, what happens that gives you your sorcerer abilities? I'm not going to like not let them do it, but it's fun to weave it into the narrative. And to some extent, I would say if they just said, I would never play with a player like this, but if they just said, I want to do big bongo damage, I would say, well, you have to wait until you gain sorcerer abilities to do that, because I, as a DM, am not interested in playing with just big bongo damage for the sake of it. I'm the DM. We can balance the encounter however. That's just not how my play group plays. But you see what I'm getting at? There are some groups for whom this wouldn't be a problem at all. They'll feel like, but you just don't have to take it. I've constantly gotten into disagreements with people where they don't understand why this bothers people, or they try to argue that it just objectively doesn't bother people, which that's obviously wrong. I'm telling you that it does bother some people. It does. You can't. It is bothering people. That's like saying people don't have a belief that you disagree with. Like, you can argue that they shouldn't have the belief, but they do have it. There are some groups for whom, again, this wouldn't bother them at all. They don't feel the pressure of the logic that would make some players feel like they kind of have to take this. And they'd respond to that logic by saying, but you just don't have to take it, which doesn't make sense. It doesn't address those players' concerns, of course. But I think it's important to note, again, I don't want to go on too long about that because I fear that Lordrusty may just be a player that doesn't have this problem. And so it's like, who cares? Like, I don't want to waste your time with that. Let me try to give some kind of quick suggestion. What's a way to limit the multi-classing of this feature? Well, what design is already in the game? When you multi-class in 5th edition, you need to have stats that are of a certain magnitude in relevant categories. So usually it'll be what you would expect would be the primary stat for the class. So if you want to be a warlock, warlocks are charisma spellcasters. So you need to have a 13 at least in charisma. If If you want to be a druid, druids are wisdom spellcasters, you need to have a 13 at least in wisdom, etc. Now, I don't think any of them currently make you have constitution, but constitution is quite frequently invested a little bit. So if you just made the player have a 13 in constitution, I kind of feel like that wouldn't be that bad for a lot of people. They'd be able to foot the bill on that. If you don't mind the awkward game design, you could, I think, pretty easily solve this problem by making the player have like a 16 in constitution, like something that would meaningfully dock their character's other effectiveness. In other words, if they're trying to be like a fighter, they're doing that Rune Knight thing I mentioned before. They're trying to be a fighter, and then they want to dip into this, but they need a 16 in constitution. If they do that early, they cannot, depending on the method that they got their stats, they cannot get as much of a bonus to hit and do damage in their primary attacking stat, strength or dexterity, probably, for a fighter. They lost damage to get that. And that's all it really needs to be. Like, as long as they pay some opportunity cost for that, there is a compelling reason for the players that are concerned to not take revival as a trait. And then I think it's fine. Like, the players worried about that are free. The players who aren't worried about that would probably already have taken a lot of constitution if they were playing this class. So yeah, that could be a solution. This is my game designer idiosyncrasy. I don't like making only one class required something other than a 13 in a stat, but I'm a nerd and that doesn't matter. So I think you should do that. Is that good enough? 16? It's not that bad, but it does mean they probably can't get, they're only losing like +1 though. That's still kind of good. For the right group, that would still be a little frustrating possibly. But what are they going to do this at? And you need to be 5th level, according to me, 6th level according to this, to have the revival be in an action. So Revivify, I was arguing earlier, is still kind of good. I think it might be fine. It might be fine. You'd really have to test that out. And I want to stress that Lordrusty on their own, no offense to Lordrusty, can never know if that is good game design. Like, you need to test that on a lot of groups of people. You need to find enough different kinds of people to see if the people who are bothered by that kind of thing feel like that's enough of a carrot to get them to not always go for this. You see what I mean? And it's kind of a group dynamic thing too. Like, you would really need to play test that heavily for it to work for a lot of people, I think. But I think the constitution thing is a simple solution. It's a little ugly. I would have to think about it more, but that's my idea for now. Okay, last thing is severable limbs. And this has been a long one, but there's been a lot to talk about. At 7th level, if a part of your body is separated from you, it can move independently. Ooh. If it is within your line of sight, you can use this body part as if it were attached to you to attack using your action. You can also move it up to 5 feet on your turn without spending any actions. If a body part is out of your sight, it will do its best to return to you. A limb separated this way has HP equal to your undying level plus your constitution. Okay, so 7 plus your constitution modifier, so probably plus 3 or 4 at this level. If you're playing this class, possibly 5. So they die to 1 hit from most enemies at 7th level. So they're very vulnerable, but they don't die to like a snake bite. Can move 5 feet per turn and has an intelligence of 2. If it's brought to 0 HP, it becomes an inanimate object. Is a corpse an object? Apparently, yes. If you've been reduced to 0 HP and killed, these body parts will continue to move toward you until they have reached you. Unless they get brought to 0 HP. Okay. Cool. This is cool. I kind of want these features earlier. Like, I want this to be the 5th level. That might be too much. The enhanced revival is going to be 5th level. Maybe this could be 6th level. I want you to get this earlier. That's really cool. That's fun. It's weird, but powerful as well. Yeah, being able to spread out your limbs like that is a powerful effect. You can attack enemies with melee. They are melee attacks, true melee attacks, without being near them. You can cut off your arm, give it an axe, throw it at someone, and have it melee them with the axe. True melee attacks, all the melee bonuses, but you are not near them. That's, you could use Fearless Attacker. while you're far away. Not sure why you take damage if you use Fearless Attacker that way, but whatever, it's fine. Yeah, that's cool. You can do multiple of them. You can move them without spending any action, but they can't do anything without your action. So it's not giving you better action economy, but it does let you multitask more efficient. It might give you slightly better action economy if you spread them out. That's interesting. Probably the thing to do at the beginning of the fight is have your party members cut off your arms and throw them into the fray, and then they can sort of move around on their own. That's interesting. I like that feature. Not a lot of notes from me. It sounds cool. I feel like that one, again, you'll want to let players use it to see what you want, and then give the player like some but not too much of whatever it is that you end up wanting. I'm not sure, but it's a cool idea. Let's summarize. Yeah, it's neat. I'm happy that you wrote this up and showed me, and were prepared for some criticism, because I had a lot, of course. But it's an early draft, as you said, so that's expected. It's really underpowered was my biggest note. Fearless Attacker is very strong, but that is deserved because the subclass doesn't have almost any raw power besides that, and it has very low health. The revival is needed as a way to make the character even playable with such low health and not many features. I first said that I think Fearless Attacker could be the first level ability, or a first level ability. I kind of like the idea of at second level you get a fighting style, but you only get the really aggressive fighting styles. You get a smaller list. And yeah, Sleep Like the Dead, I just don't think is enough of a feature. It's a good flavor thing, but it's not enough of a feature. I'm interested in more true name related things. That's a bit of design space that you could use. At higher levels, maybe speaking your true name can do things with your body. Severable limbs, I think, is a really fun, like, middle level trait. I actually think 7th level is probably fine for that. It's a bit of micro, but not too much. Like, there wouldn't be a lot of benefits to cutting off a ton of your limbs that I can think of. But it seems cool. That's appealing. Could be interesting with races that have different limbs, like a race with a tail or more than 2 arms would have some advantages. That's very cool. That's cute. The Savant subclass, I said I don't think is strong enough or really strong at all. I think giving them a weapon proficiency, and they have expertise in that proficiency, or you can just say you gain 1 additional skill proficiency and 1 weapon proficiency, and you have expertise, or you double your proficiency bonus for any proficiency you gain in this way, and you can change them when you die. Is good. That increased chance to hit is excellent. It makes the simple weapons thing kind of stand out. It kind of digs into the character's strength being that they're fearless and reckless, not that they're heavily martially skilled, which I kind of get now that I've read through the whole thing. That might not have been your idea, but I'm kind of getting that feeling. That's cool. If they find a magic weapon of any type, they can use this feature to get proficiency with it. And it's double proficiency. That's good. That's cool. The scrying while dead thing, that's interesting. Again, kind of that seance-y feel. Encourages your party to kill you, which is interesting. What else? That's most of it. Yeah, I definitely think you've got some power budget to work with. You can buff a good amount here. It sounds cool. It sounds fun. The multi-classing concern, the only elegant solution I came up with was having it require a constitution score that's pretty high, like 16 at the lowest, because players need to invest enough constitution that they are meaningfully reducing their chance to hit and damage output with whatever they're doing damage with, unless they make an ultra specific build, in which case, like, you can decide if that's okay with you. Yeah, otherwise it seems cool. I'm curious to hear what you think, I guess, about the current Undying subclass for Warlocks. This is pretty different in its gameplay approach. It's a lot more, it gets a lot away from Dungeons and Dragons. It's quite gory. I don't think that's bad, but it involves a lot more cutting people down and chucking limbs off and stuff than D&D currently features. That part's very different. The flavor, though, isn't very different. You could borrow a lot from that subclass. The last thing I wanted to say is you could make it a subclass. You could make this be more or less an abridged set of the features for the Undying subclass for Warlocks. That could be interesting. Warlocks, if they take the Undying subclass, are already basically martially unskilled. So many of these features would fit, or a lot of the flavor would fit. You just don't give them a fighting style. There's no Pact Made subclass because they already have Warlock spell slots. The Savant thing, yeah, you give them a skill proficiency and a weapon proficiency, and they have expertise because they otherwise wouldn't have any martial weapons. They get Fearless Attacker and Severable Limbs as their primary traits, maybe the Volatile subclass traits. You could easily make this be the Warlock Undying subclass, but with, in my opinion, much cooler features. If you were interested in doing that, I might do that. I was always kind of yawn about that subclass. I might adapt this that you've written into a more exciting version of the Undying subclass for Warlocks. It's fine that you've done it this way. Just a thought that, and really to other people watching this video, if this sounds cool to you, but you, like me, are not sold that it's really an archetype for a class, I do think at the very least this is a cooler version of the Undying subclass. I'm totally sold on the gameplay of this, by the way. I almost just want this in a different system, but most of my complaints are developer idiosyncrasies from me as a game designer, right? They're not things that are like bad. They would only upset a certain type of player. So I hope that was helpful. It was long, but I had a lot to say. I had fun. Thanks for asking.